Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I'm your host, Carly, and I'll be your guide on this journey from consciousness to cluelessness and back around again. Today on the podcast, on this short solo episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the intersection of being vegan and being an environmentalist. I've been trying to cover some of these questions that often come up in the vegan world, in the wellness world, in the sustainability world, and this is one of them I get a lot. Do you have to be vegan to be an environmentalist? So let's dive into that. And remember, if there's any questions like this that would be helpful for me to dive into that you can think of, let me know. Here we go. In 2016, Mint Mobile was born because its founders thought that big wireless was, well, dumb. So they decided it was time to create a smarter wireless company, one that extends its middle finger to conventional truths while also pointing out where big wireless is letting people down. They're online only. You can buy plans that are 3-month, 6-month, 12-month, no contracts. Choose to stay as long as you want. There are no overages. There's no surprises. There's just no BS. And for someone who lives in a remote area like myself, I can attest to the fact that the service is great and I have truly had no problems and oftentimes is better than the big wireless companies I was with before. To find out more about how Mint Mobile can work for you, hit the link in the show notes so they know that I sent you. This podcast is supported by Parade Underwear. Parade believes that the materials that touch your skin should be as comfortable as possible, wherever life takes you. That's why their styles come in a large range of fabrics, from seamless universal that disappears under clothes, to cozy waffles plush comfort that keep you comfy on every occasion. Parade understands that everyone deserves to express themselves however they choose, because we're all unique. And Parade knows that there's no parade without our planet. They strive to make all of their products from reclaimed, recycled, responsible, renewable, or regenerative materials. This is really a win-win-win. I love Parade. I've been wearing them for a while now, and I can't recommend them enough. And of course, we love the mission. Use code consciously.carly for 20% off your first order. That's consciously.carly, consciously.carly. Enjoy your new undies. All right, so let's answer this question. Do you need to be vegan to care about the planet, to be an environmentalist? This is a question that pops up a lot in vegan communities and spaces, a lot in environmental communities and spaces. It is a really interesting question, and I want to say before I share my thoughts that that is what they are. They are my thoughts. This is my opinion. I'm going to be sharing some other things I found online, but remember that this is where I come from in my position of the world. So this might piss some vegans off. This might piss some environmentalists off. I don't know, but we'll see what happens. So the question is, do you have to be vegan to be an environmentalist or to care about the planet? The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. You do not have to be vegan to care about the planet or to think of yourself as an environmentalist. According to Merriam-Webster, an environmentalist is, quote, a person who is concerned with or advocates for the protection of the environment, unquote. That's a pretty cut and dry definition, right? An environmentalist is someone who's like, holy shit, the world's on fire, what are we going to do? That's my interpretation of that Merriam-Webster dictionary definition. Environmentalists can be passionate about air, water, soil, maybe Earth's overall survival or the health and well-being of plants and animals or bee populations. I mean, there's so many pieces of our environment that you can be passionate about and can make a difference in, right? So why does this question of, do you have to be vegan comes up? Like, why does that even come into question as often as it does? Well, it's because the impact of going vegan or going plant-based or being as plant-based as you can is pretty vast. It's like a pretty big impact. So of course there is going to be that question. So really, I guess my answer to that question originally is no but. And it's a pretty big but, right? I've referenced a lot of articles and research before, but it's safe to say at this point that reducing meat and dairy and animal products from your diet can have a huge impact on the overall emissions in our world, which we need to be worried about because, again, the world is on fire, right? Like, I guess why this question comes up, circling back even further, it's because more and more people are talking about the environment and potentially going vegan, which I think is obviously amazing. But it does mean that questions like this come up because then everybody wants to do it right or do it perfectly and tell the people that aren't doing it right or perfectly that they are doing it wrong. And I want to share that while, of course, you don't have to be vegan to be an environmentalist, my caveat or my big but is that if you have the privilege and the ability to think about it, to research it, to be a flexitarian, which means you do plant-based but give some allowances here and there, whatever the title is for you, I absolutely think you should do it. So do you have to? No. Are there amazing people doing amazing work for our planet that do not identify as vegan? Of course. It would be ignorant to think any other way. However, I think there are a lot of people in the environmental movement, or maybe it's you listening right now, there are a lot of people who know they could do better with their food consumption in terms of cutting meat and dairy. And we're just looking at this from strictly an environmental perspective, not to mention animal rights, human rights, and health, and all the other things, right? Just from the environment. I think there are a lot of people who are resistant to examine the privilege they have with food because that might mean they should change their habits. So there are a lot of ways to be vegan for people that don't have access to the resources about going vegan or eating just more plants, more whole food plant-based. And that's okay. But there are a lot of people who are burying their head in the sand because they don't want to think about changing their diet because it seems overwhelming, it seems scary, it seems impossible. They think that they're only going to have to eat tofu and salads for the rest of their life, whatever it is. There are a lot of people who have the privilege, the time, the money, all of it, to make those choices that would better help the planet, and they don't. So do you have to be vegan? No. But I do think that we have a responsibility, if we have a certain amount of privilege, to examine what we can do with that information. We now know for a fact it reduces emissions. So what do we do with that information? There was a study at the University of Oxford that discovered plant-based diets could actually reduce one's carbon footprint contributed by food consumption by 73%. 73% by cutting food and dairy and animal products out. That is huge. And think about a lot of people making that big of a switch, right? Not only does it show the market like, hey, we're not interested in this shit food anymore, but it also does drastically lower emissions. It's not on all of us as individuals to make this change. It is big corporation. It is social injustice. But there are ways that we can show up that have a difference, and there's power in that. And eating a more plant-based diet is one of those that I think is really important to examine. So I'll reiterate it. I'll go back and say it again. It's probably like the 5th time in this episode that I've said it. You do not have to be vegan to be an environmentalist. Period. You don't. You absolutely don't. And also, maybe someone who identifies as vegan doesn't necessarily think of themselves as much of an environmentalist. The two don't go hand in hand. I would argue that if you're eating a whole foods plant-based diet, you are helping the environment, but that's okay. I digress. It is so important to ask these hard questions and to kind of examine this. as we talk more and more about being vegan, being plant-based, and the environment, I think it's really good that these questions get asked. And remember that there's not necessarily an easy answer, right? There's not necessarily a cut and dry answer. You don't have to be vegan to be an environmentalist. But I think, in my opinion, you have a certain responsibility, if you have the privilege to do so, to do what you can and to learn about those choices, because we're just dealing with straight up facts now. There are large ways to reduce our emissions, and going vegan is one of them. So if that's something you're interested in, of course, please remember that I can totally help. It gets really overwhelming, and maybe you just need a place to start. And if that's sounding like something you're interested in, head to my website. The link is in my bio, and you can find out more about coaching. I would love to chat more with you about going vegan. Thanks for listening to another episode of Consciously Clueless. If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe, share with your friends, put it on social media. Don't forget to tag me. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Good Pods, leave a review. Reviews and shares help more people to see the podcast and join in on the fun. If you want to make sure to stay up to date on future episodes, follow me at Consciously Carly on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or Pinterest, and head to consciouslycarly.com to sign up for the newsletter. Ready for more conscious living content? Check out patreon.com/consciouslycarly and join the exclusive community over there. And finally, if you're ready to take better care of yourself and the world, let's work together. Click the link in the show notes to head to the website, find out more, and schedule a free discovery call with me. Chat soon!